Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. This episode is part of our special summer series called Leaving Home Stories, in which writers from the Habit membership will read personal narratives on the theme of leaving home, literally or metaphorically, temporarily or permanently. When you step out your door, you never know what you're stepping into. In this week's episode, we have 3 stories of people leaving home and finding themselves in situations where the stakes were higher than they realized. I'm mighty proud of the writers in the Habit membership. If you like the idea of writing alongside the writers you're hearing in this series, we'd love to have you. Find out more at thehabit.co. Our first reader is Sara Bannerman. Besides being a teacher of high school English, Sara is a master of the short personal narrative. You can follow her work on her Substack, Clumsy Link. In this story, Sara remembers being a young girl put in a very unsettled and unsettling situation. Here's Sara Bannerman reading The Stolen Child.
The name Catherine was on the air as adults scrambled through the house. She was not Victoria's biological mother, but that didn't stop her from this dogged pursuit bordering on desperation. I never met her, but I knew she wanted Victoria, which is more than you could say for Victoria's birth mother, who delivered the child and then walked out of her life. Catherine was the only mother Victoria knew. She called her Mom, no matter how frequently an adult would correct her, no matter how much her stepmother tried to win her affection with clothes and toys. The one time I saw Victoria cry was when her father told her that the woman with red lipstick was her new mother. Victoria ran out of the room, her curly head thrown back in despair. Mother set me down the hallway to the back bedroom where Victoria fled, but by the time I got there, she had stopped crying. My dad's brother was caught up in a custody battle over Victoria, who was just a little younger than myself. She and I were fellow obsessors over The Lion King, though she spent more time crafting her particular kind of lion's roar. "You do it like this," she said, and she hissed like a cornered possum. She flashed her pronounced incisors, which, I'll admit, enhanced the effect. But I still took it upon myself as the older, wiser cousin to inform her that that was not roaring. And that was the extent of my wisdom. She was the one who introduced me to a few cuss words, and since she went to school and I did not, she taught me the morbid songs children sang about their teachers. When drama unfolds among adults, children can sense it. The grown-ups move quickly from one place to the next. Sometimes they whisper, they take phone calls in other rooms. The phone cord stretches taut under the closed door. The child is allowed to play outside a little past dark, or she watches a little late-night TV. Once when my parents were having a serious conversation in the living room, I lay in their bed and watched Bewitched. Another time, Mom and Dad were conversing, except they were not whispering. It was no place for a child, and so I decided there were 3 grown-ups in the house instead of 2. I opened a can of Chef Boyardee, and instead of scooping out my normal half portion, I ate the whole thing, and straight out of the can, like a bum by a campfire. The last 3 or 4 ravioli went down with considerable effort. This kind of rushing and talking over a child's head once revolved around Victoria, who was brought to our house by her father and stepmother, a large, friendly woman with frosted hair and bright red lipstick. On that day, the phone rang and rang and rang, and yet no one answered it. The phone cord was gathered in its gray coil and kicked out of the way of traffic. Victoria had her suitcase as though she would spend the night with us, and yet she never unpacked it. Instead, Mother packed my suitcase. I know now that all the unanswered phone calls that day were from Catherine. She was a lioness looking for her lost cub. Meanwhile, Victoria was silent, numb, weirdly unresistant. She was like a little game piece, sitting on our couch with her suitcase by her feet, sitting next to me in our minivan on the long ride, sitting at a kitchen table, sitting on the edge of a creaky guest bed. Our parents drove us far out into the country, and by nightfall we arrived at a low farmhouse. The town, undisclosed. The owners of the house, never mentioned. They were an elderly couple, perhaps Victoria's step-grandparents, but I don't remember even being introduced to them. That's how veiled in secrecy the whole thing was, as shrouded in darkness as the little house itself. I don't remember my parents telling me goodbye or mentioning when they'd come back. I just remember being in a kitchen cast in orange light, like a magic lantern show hosted by a kind old man and his wife. I talked to Mother that night on a phone high up the wall in the house's little hallway. I asked her why I was there, considering that no bereft woman was searching for me. In fact, no one seemed much concerned about where I was at all. Mother said Victoria needed me, and that I should be brave for her. Even now, when Mother and I try to piece that night together, she reminds me of why I was there. For Victoria's sake. That's the part she holds on to, even as I'm sure she still wrestles with sending me out into the middle of nowhere, under the trust of perfect strangers. Halfway into that phone call was when the homesickness kicked in, when I at last recognized the unilateral decision made by all the grown-ups that I should not come back for a time. Sunset was long over, and no one was coming to get me. Maybe I actually have no memory of homesickness, but rather one pronounced pain of being exiled. That night, Victoria and I were shown to a bedroom with a creaking brass bed. In all these memories, my cousin was silent. It may be that we whispered into the night as children should when they are caught in the middle of covert operations. But in every foggy image from that experience, I can only see the back of Victoria's head, her bobbed ringlets turned towards me as she slept. I've never known if my being there did her any good. As for Catherine, she was a kind of overnight storm. The threat passed by morning, and we returned home later that day. Whatever effect that night at the farmhouse had on my cousin, it was for me the last outpost. The conversation with my mother was short, the terms of my exile vague, though not out of any cold-heartedness on her part. It was either too painful for my mother to hear my quivering voice, or she believed that giving me more time to think about my situation would have made things worse. I hung up the phone and climbed into that old bed with my cousin, and so she was there with me in what felt like a kind of departure, one of those hard-to-swallow experiences of growing up, I guess. The next time Victoria came to my house with a suitcase, I was a little older, 13 maybe, and she came for an honest, old-fashioned sleepover. By then, I had experienced a shift in my tastes. I liked P.G. Wodehouse more than The Lion King. I was in love with Dr. McNeil from the Christie series. If I was 13, Victoria would have been 10 when she stayed with me in my newly decorated bedroom with more mature, rose-patterned bedspreads for my twin beds. That night, with only the glow of a hallway light to give any shape to my cousin's face, she leaned out over the edge of her bed and taught me one last cuss word. "Bastard," she whispered to me, quietly but carefully enunciating each syllable. She didn't know what it meant. Neither did I. She buried her face in her hands, and we both laughed.
Sara Bannerman, I always love reading what you write, and this was no exception. So thanks for sharing your story with us. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor.
You, when I read what you write, you give me the impression of being a person who trusts that her own life will provide what she needs to write something interesting. Not all writers feel that their life is sufficiently interesting, or maybe, I mean, what I think another way of thinking about it is sometimes people aren't paying enough attention to their own life to know that things are happening all the time that may not be the stuff of the next great American novel, but are certainly the stuff of a little personal reflection. What do you, I mean, do you think is that true, that you see your life as being sort of adequately interesting to give you stuff to write about?
I think it's interesting enough, but also puts me at the risk of being a little navel-gazy. I think that's the thing that I'm trying to be aware of as I'm starting to write about stuff in my personal life. How much of that is actually interesting to other people? And then what's the sort of otherness beyond myself that people would be perhaps more interested in?
What do you mean when you say the otherness?
Like my attempts to look beyond myself and take in the world that God has made, for us to participate in, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Less about what I think the world should gather from it, or how they should be shaped or changed, or less about even how I feel about it, but just more of an observational kind of observation of pattern is kind of the phrase that I've been using, especially when teaching my students how to write or how to read, just to extract or to notice a pattern of something and to then kind of hold on to that and do something with it.
Yeah. Okay, you changed your verb there, right? You started to say extract a pattern, then you said, I think, observe a pattern.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, I have caught myself trying to make things more meaningful, I think, than they really are sometimes too.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, I was struggling with a piece that I was going to release on Substack today that was supposed to be all of this like serendipitous, look at this, look how this pattern just keeps showing up and this is what it means. And then I realized at about midnight last night that I was just making all that up. There wasn't meaning in it like I thought there was.
A friend of mine ran into a guy who said, everything is triangles. The whole universe is triangles. And he was talking to two people, goes, look here, we're standing in a triangle. But, the only way three people can stand is in a triangle
Yeah.
unless they're in a line.
Which
And
is practical for conversation.
um, but your writing doesn't strike me as overly nasal gate, navel gazy or interior. I mean, it does feel like you're
Good.
always looking out. Um, and so, I mean, if you're afraid of being too navel gazy or too interior, how have you gotten over that?
Bringing this writing into the community, I think. I think when someone else looks at it,
Yeah.
they're very helpful in giving me that kind of feedback. Also, I think once you write enough and you know what you like and you've read other things that you like,
Yeah.
you can kind of sniff it out in your writing as you
Mm,
go. Like
yeah.
something just feels icky about what you have in front of you.
Yeah.
And for me, at least 9 times out of 10, it's because I've gotten way too much into um, my own sort of introspective sort of perspective on things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been fun to see you settle into the short nonfiction pieces that really feel like they're your wheelhouse. Um, and that
I
might,
like those a lot. I
yeah,
think that's come from your advice too, because you've always talked about working in your own little patch of ground. And for me, the idea of fiction is such a massive patch of ground that I don't think I could never go back to that sort of thing.
you don't think you'll ever go back to fiction writing?
I don't think so, at least right now.
Okay.
I've tried to. I tried to in the class that you were doing. I was like, I'm gonna go back and write a little something, and then
It didn't work.
it just didn't work.
Huh. Okay. Well, one definition of habit is the natural shape of a plant. Plant's habit. Some are mounding habits, some have a vining habit, and sometimes living in your habit is just knowing kind of where your gifts lie.
Knowing your limits. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but that doesn't mean that you can't grow into something else.
That is true. Yeah. I will never say never.
Good. I'm glad you're not saying never. Did
Yeah.
you make that up? Never say never?
I
Somebody needs to write
did.
that down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that's
I
all.
just came off the top of my head.
Well, Sarah, thanks so much. And I hope you keep writing these little slices of your life, of things that you've observed, because I think you're giving us something we can't get for ourselves. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for all that you're doing for all of us who are wanting to become better writers.
My pleasure.
Mandy Link is a runner as well as a writer. An incident on a familiar running trail gave Mandy an opportunity to reassess a lot of things. Here's Mandy reading her story, Pacer.
Saturday morning, I step out the front door, leaving home, and it begins. No warm-up for me. It's a jog from the time my feet hit the driveway pavement, a push right from the start, because warm-ups carry the potential of a warm-up staying a walk, when what I want on that day is a close your eyes and just do it run with a shock start like new life emerging. Given too much time to think, I'll change my mind, and that new life might turn to life arrested. I've never been one for the gentle start, not on the trail. If the first movement of life is a raise of the head, a roll over, pull up, toddle a step, ugly walk, a messy yet logical sequence before the first exhilaratingly awkward run, it would make sense to approach my Saturday morning run with a similar progression. Some stretching, a slow walk that graduates to a brisk power walk, arms pumping in time to a curated Spotify playlist. But the mind, it's a muscle that needs a shove. And mine is in full-on rebellion from the first pound of Brooks on the driveway pavement. So I skip the slow start, and I shove. I returned to running when my hair was still all brown. Starry-eyed and following the latest app to make a runner out of a couch potato, I believed that at the end of the program, the plan, the guided instructions, my run would be an easy, breezy, breathful, not breathless celebration of the human body's precise engineering. And I've seen those runners. Haven't we all seen those runners? Beautiful in their full glory of strong pumping legs. I imagine that's how they approach every stride of every run. That's how they approach life. They're all in. Cue the theme song to Chariots of Fire. My first full runs, the ones where I graduated from intermittent run walks to only running, way to go me, form deep grooves in my memory because, much to my disappointment, it's never not been hard. Immediately I relive the first run, the 10th run, the 100th run, a sudden screech in my head, "You sure you want to do this again?" You're leaving home. Home will be miles behind you soon. It'd be easier to walk, even easier to ignore the trail completely. Running from home started years ago in a period too late to call postpartum, but a stage that nonetheless links tightly in my brain with my youngest child's first years. A physical exit from home and baby and lifelong commitment and the recurrence of a feeling, sad but maybe more. The feeling flitting in and out like a gnat. Just go away. It's gone, but then it's back, buzzing in my ear, so I run away from the feeling and toward the hope of not feeling. Leaving home, the relief of away is laced tightly with the guilt of away. Me asking, is it right to take this for myself? And also, why do I need this for myself? Meanwhile, the steady track of life continues. It meanders, but it's relentless. And the path carries me down one street or another, me choosing or acting by direction or some combination of the two, depending on your theology. But either way, the life track uncomfortably and inevitably points to the tick-tock clock that's counting down. It brings an idea that quietly paces alongside me. There was a beginning, and there will be an end. Think more about the end. The trail I run on passes directly behind my house and spans miles. A minute, and I'm on a hill. The hill feels different at the beginning of a run. The synchronization of legs and arms, air dancing over limbs, lungs pumping in and out, each breath interconnected with the next. Nitrogen and oxygen transformed into something else becomes supernatural. The sweet home call scent of new leaf and spring flower, oh my, the jasmine, mixed with wet, rotting foliage, and a cool breeze is suddenly Eucharistic. In less than a mile, that breeze will slide over my sweat, and I'll send up a cry of thank you to the Creator for the gift of both. Sweat and breeze, story elements laid down in seemingly simple beats that point to a coming resolution. Theistic certainty springs forth. The heavens rejoice. If only the hilltop lasted forever. Marathon author Jeff Galloway says, to run faster, you must run faster. And there's one of those cosmic lies that look like truth buried in the connotation. Don't you feel that at the beginning? Leaving home, following the path, sometimes leaving the path, coming home. If I just run faster, I'll run faster. Run faster, faster. You're too slow. Look around you. Everyone else is going faster. But there's the lie. See, there's a community of faces and names on the trail, and they're traveling at different speeds. Leaving home, going home. The familiar people I meet with metronomic regularity. We exchange greetings and smiles. This is mixed with the ephemeral sprinkle of the homeless, one drifting, one on the way to the possibility of something better. But all of us, the regulars and the occasional, share something simple. I was born. I've lived a life. And on this day, I am still alive. A profound connection. Just beyond, but regularly slowing and sidling up next to me is my pacer. She whispers, "And then what?" Because shouldn't every breathful realization of today's gifted life bring consideration of the last? I run and wonder how many of my fellow trail travelers are thinking about the end. Nestled between the head nods and friendly hellos, they carry the same burden. Leaving home, coming home. When we pass, is this an invisible communion of thought that we miss? I'd been in Texas less than 2 years when our local news reported on a body found near the trail. A homeless man, discovered in a tent, skeletal. Police said he'd been there at least a year. Mere yards from regular runners and walkers, but we'd missed his exit from this life to the next. We stood as distant witnesses to his epilogue, like book cheaters who read the last page and miss everything that came before. Not long after, I was running intervals on a 1-mile stretch of trail near my house. I passed a man several times, and we exchanged the perfunctory nod and smile. Something about him communicated transience, and as I approached the man a third time, I had a pressing need to know his name. My whole life, words and actions can go unsaid or undone if I don't act immediately. So I stopped and introduced myself. A pause to acknowledge another life. A pause to meet James and hear his story, and with it the ephemeral becomes eternal. To run faster, you have to run faster. But what do you miss when you don't slow down? The run continues. Later on, the hill, any hill, becomes a mode of transportation for wild thought chains firing in multiple directions. One thought, so loud it's impossible to ignore, says stop. Listen to the ache in your legs and lungs and stop. Running hurts. It's hard. At this point, I'm also mentally calculating the uptick in the temperature, feeling it more on the hill. How hot is it now? How much hotter is it going to get? Why didn't I bring any water? But the middle of the hill is a terrible place to give up. I can't see what's on the other side until I get to the top, so I keep running. Slow or fast, it doesn't matter. Just keep moving. And although the high, holy thoughts of mysteriously beautiful sweat and breeze and sweet-scented jasmine are layers deep at this point, a hill is always a heavy encounter. And in the midst of one foot moving in front of the other, I remember, no hill lasts forever. And if hope deferred makes the heart sick, such joy is that longing fulfilled, that therein lies a tree of life. So keep running. Deeper into the run brings muscle pain and heavy legs and strained breath, and with a now alarmingly red face, I become intimately acquainted with the pavement. I look up less, sometimes watching pavement seams, counting them as they pass, marking the steps and seconds between each one. One more breath, one more day, one more week, pondering last breaths and the pain of leaving home, coupled with the beauty of coming home. Precise engineering and purposeful design at odds with frailty and brokenness, limitation and imperfection, a deep longing for healing and restoration. Our days may come to 70 or 80 years, or to one breath, or sometimes less. Living well and leaving life, leaving home, to die is gain. And that's the crux, isn't it? Don't I want leaving home to be a gain and not an eternal loss? At the end of the run, I walk. I slow down and look up and out at the green and blue and brown and listen to the sounds of life shouting all around me. A chorus of bird and bug, man and machine. The heavens rejoice. I smile and pause, this time to embrace and count the stark reality behind life's first breath and the coming last as blessing. Death swallowed up in victory. Today, leaving home ends with a return to my front door, rattle of the key in the lock, lungs relaxing into a normal rhythm, sweat cooling my body with the gift of a cool breeze. I come home and catch my breath.
Mandy Link, thank you for being here on the Habit Podcast, and thanks for sharing the story with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm interested in talking about what running has taught you about writing, or vice versa. What has writing taught you about running?
Mm-hmm. The processes can be very similar, and especially like if you go like start running like you've never ran before. There is a whole kind of training process that does happen in the mind and with the body, and beginning a new run and a new writing project can both have the same kind of like you're jumping in, you're excited about what you're about to do, and There's a lot of ideas flowing and you feel really good. I tend to like, once I kind of get into a rhythm of the first mile or whatever, I'm feeling pretty good
Yeah.
about what's happening. But just like in your writing project, you kind of get into it and you can hit that spot where you're like, all right, I kind of vomited out all the great ideas that I had at the beginning. And now, I've got to start really thinking about what I'm doing more.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, I run some. I don't love, some people love running. I don't love it. I do it. But,
Yeah.
and one thing that I kind of learned was, if the question is, can I run 5 miles? Can I run 5 miles right now? It's kind of like, I don't know. I'm tired. I don't want to. But if it's, can I run to the next telephone pole? Well, I can do that. And I can go to the next telephone pole after that. And I can eventually get where I'm going, one telephone pole at a time. And, writing, you don't write books, you write sentences and you write paragraphs. And I've found that a really helpful reminder when I'm in the middle of something and thinking, can I write a book? No. Not exactly, but I can write a paragraph, and then I can do the next one after that.
Yeah, I do both of those actually that you mentioned in writing and running. Let me just get to that next milestone, the next tree, whatever, especially as you get later on in a project. But I do the same thing with writing, like, all right, this page, let me just finish a page.
Yeah.
And then maybe we'll do another.
Yeah.
See how I'm feeling.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I remember one time I was there's a hill near our house that my usual route I have to run up, and you get to the it's like it's a relatively steep hill, and then you get to the top and it flattens out for a minute. I mean, for just a few yards, and then it starts going up again. And that for some reason that was really instructive for my whole life to think, you've got to run to the summit thinking if I can just get to the summit, I'll be okay. And then you get there and you realize that's not the summit.
Yeah.
You got to keep going.
Here comes another one. Yeah.
And that the day that I sort of made that realization was the day I just really needed to know that about the rest of my life, not just about running,
Yeah, it seems kind of obvious, but I remember thinking that when I would face a hill, and it's kind of in my essay, that idea that you can't decide whether you're going to do the hill when you're on the hill. You have to just keep running the hill. Like you can't stop. There's what's at the top. You got to find out.
Yeah.
Run through the trouble.
That's right. Yeah. So I want to ask you one other thing. I'd like to hear you say just a little bit more about that line from your story, in which you're quoting some running guru who says the way to run faster is to run faster, and you say that's one of those lies that sounds true. I love that. I know what that person means, and I also know you can't live that way.
Yeah, that's a line straight out of his book Marathon. And in running, it actually is the way you run faster. You have to practice running faster. Like it really is that simple. But in life, it feels like that is the advice that we are given all the time. Not in those words, but in other kind of ways that, to get more done, to get ahead, you just have to keep moving faster and faster, do more. And it's such a lie. You are less productive, but also it's just not a way to flourish. Yeah. Everybody's moving at different speeds, and that's okay, and that's beautiful. Yeah. So fighting against that, I think, is like a lifelong process. Yeah.
Well, and there's especially with creative work, there's the matter of if you don't have some fallow seasons, you can push for a while and be productive, but if you're not in touch with the world, which, as you said, moves at different speeds, there's a limit to how long that's going to work for you.
Yeah.
Well, Mandy, thanks so much for taking a minute to talk to me, and thanks for the story. I love that reminder that life isn't just a matter of going faster, but paying attention. So
thank you for giving me the chance to share it.
Thanks so much. All right, bye.
Bye.
Jan Cooper is a prize-winning writer, as you will learn in the following story. In her case, the prize was an opportunity to go out in the wilderness and possibly get herself eaten by a bear. Here's Jan Cooper's story, Winning.
Winning. I knew camping. By the time I turned 17, I'd spent close to a year of my life in a tent. Every summer, my family left our Illinois suburban prairie to explore mountains and lakes and seas elsewhere, from Colorado all the way to Nova Scotia. And I knew camps, at least our little church camp with hikes and games and songs around bonfires. But my 16th summer, the calendar loomed empty before me. No trips, no camps, no real summer job possibilities beyond babysitting drudgery. Then my dad produced a new possibility. He spotted an essay contest for teens in one of his lumber industry journals. If I could produce a winning piece, I would fly up to northern Minnesota, all expenses paid, to a month-long camp called Outward Bound. Like Hamilton, I could write my way out. Hint, if you know the musical, you know how that turned out for Alexander. I can imagine my nature-loving dad thinking, what better place for his restless, mouthy, book-loving 16-year-old daughter to go than to a month of canoeing and hiking? For myself, I relished the thought of being away on my own, of flying on a plane for the first time. I wrote, rewrote, typed my best effort on our manual typewriter, and mailed off my essay. What I wrote, I have no idea now. There's no save button on a manual typewriter, and the box that held the magazine with my essay must have ended up in Dad's purge after my mom died a decade later. But I won. Maybe the magazine received only that one essay that year. They never said how many losers were out there. Maybe other teens grasped what winning such a trip would entail. Naively ecstatic, I started counting down the days till July. It should have triggered an alarm when the welcome letter from Outward Bound informed me that I had to be able to run and swim a mile before I arrived. Okay, I thought, and gave it a half-hearted shot. I ran around the block a few times. I could manage a few laps a side stroke. I'd been to camp. I didn't give much thought to any of their requirements. Not that I was overly athletic or prone to pushing myself to my physical limits. It would never have occurred to me. The concept of fitness remained on the outskirts of most women's vocabulary in the 70s, early 70s, especially that of my mother and aunts. Limited sports options for girls dealt more in the currency of social status than in fitness. Dance squad or cheerleading guaranteed popularity. Intramural field hockey or basketball, deep six to girls' overall desirability. I didn't either, opting to write for the school newspaper instead. So with only the vaguest notion of what a body could go through, I boarded my first plane for Chicago. I looked out the window to see my mom's old suitcase splayed open on the tarmac. Two men were closing it with wide circles of yellow tape. No sign of my older sister's cast-off guitar that I'd brought for those anticipated campfire nights. I settled into my seat, unsettled. A second flight carried me from Chicago to the far north edge of Minnesota. Other girls stood around Ely, Minnesota's tiny airport, waiting for the bus to camp. I noticed the duffel bags and backpacks at their feet. No other full-size suitcases with yellow tape. You brought a guitar to Outward Bound, one girl asked, and I sensed smirks. Girls asked each other where they were from, and most were East Coasters, not Midwesterners. Some with bulging arm and leg muscles seemed to be in motion, even standing still. They were ready for this camp's real physical challenges, they said. Others stood slouched, arms crossed in a silent sulk, sent to camp, I found out later, while their parents lolled around Europe. I was the only contest winner. Somehow I wasn't feeling very lucky. A long wait, and two camp leaders showed up. It's too muddy for the bus, one informed us. We'll have to hike in. We groaned, fell in line behind them with our gear. No one had a flashlight. Each step reached into the unknown dark. How far, we all wanted to know, a question we'd repeat many times over many trails in the next month. There was never an answer. Outward Bound, I would soon find out, preached the gospel of can-do independence. But the walk that night was far enough and my suitcase heavy enough that one leader actually carried it for short spells. The hike in didn't get us to our bunks until after 2 a.m. That gave us a few hours to sleep before a pre-dawn 4-mile run before breakfast. I hobbled to the end, where a spreading mud pit loomed, with leaders egging us on through it. By the third day, I realized that I had managed to win a trip to boot camp, to Vietnam minus the shooting, to a Minnesota gulag on postcard lakes with grueling portage trails that snaked between them. Our group of 8 survived lessons on flipping kayaks, belaying steep cliffs, balancing on high ropes courses, being harnessed to pull ourselves along a cable that stretched up across canyons. 2 other girls and I bungled orienteering into an unplanned open night in the woods. And that was just week 1, base camp. For a few days after that, we kayaked out of the camp for 5 days, transporting our kayaks across portage trails between swift creeks and rivers around the camp. My kayak weighed more than anything I had ever attempted to lift. Hoisting it to my shoulders felt Herculean, followed by a nightmare scenario of nearly impossible requirements. Attempt to balance it and move forward. Keep my backpack from jostling against it. Start over when the kayak bumps a low branch and slides off. No one told us that Outward Bound had opened up to girls only 6 summers before. They'd originally designed a program to toughen up boys, not girls. Watching me flounder, they might have stuck with Plan A. Next came a longer journey. We traded kayaks for canoes to head into the boundary waters. As I recall, there were no life jackets aboard. No one wore sunglasses or sunscreen. Loaded with gear, our team's 2 leaders paddled their canoe in front. Then came solo, the supposed pinnacle of our experience. I capitalized the word out of fear and respect. For solo, I received a tarp, 6 matches, a fishing hook and line, a tiny bag of salt, a tin pot, a pocket knife, a journal, and a pen. No personal supplies, changes of clothes, or sleeping bag. Leaders deposited each of us on our own islands, widely spaced apart, separated from all human life. Mornings and evenings, the leader's canoe would float by with only a silent wave to verify general survival. The 6 matches should have been my clue that this ordeal would last a full 6 days. If I'm looking to share an uplifting narrative, those days don't fit. Desperate searches for food, an exaggerated awareness of time. Heating leaves in my tin filled with water over the campfire. The campfire I managed to keep going to make a safe but dreadful tea. I set aside my lifelong gag reflex when I eat any kind of fish but canned tuna. This after a childhood of fishing with my father and helping him cook it over a campfire. I cast my line and hook in the water and waited, as fearful of catching and eating a fish as of not catching one. The fish must have sensed my ambivalence and stayed away. Hunger grew stronger. I cornered a meaty frog. Let's call him Gerald, in a homemade trap. I looked him in his bulging eyes, and he blinked a clear message back at me. Should I roast him over my fire, I would be certain to deposit him back on the island, leaving me empty and queasy. Only later did someone tell me that frog meat tasted like chicken. But I spared him the pain of making that discovery for myself, and eventually set him free. Gerald, I hope you had a happy rest of your non-fishy amphibian life on that scruffy, isolated patch of land. I spared you. You're welcome. By day 3 of solo, I figured that my only ticket off the island ahead of schedule would be if I injured myself. They'd have to feed and care for me, right? I seriously contemplated how to break my arm to end my stay. But how do you break your own arm? Who knew my limbs were so sturdy? It felt like a failure that I couldn't do it, that I plain lacked the courage to try. Add that to an equal and opposite perceived shortcoming, the lack of fortitude I showed in wanting to escape solo. If I'd been stronger, I would have endured the test, wouldn't I? How weak was I really? It should have seemed odd to me afterwards that the other girls and I never discussed our solo experiences in any depth. Had they struggled the same way I had? I'll never know, and it would be years before I would reevaluate my own sense of falling short in the ordeal. Before evening on day 6, we regrouped, 1 girl, 1 island at a time. Our leaders fed us a bland and watery meal. They returned our sleeping bags and clothes. They would be leaving now, they told us, taking an alternate route to base camp. See you at camp, they said, with what felt like a masochist enthusiasm as they paddled off. I wondered if we ever would see them again, or find camp, or get back home. I never thought I could be homesick for Peoria, or feel eager to have knowledgeable adults in charge of me again. The 8 of us stood there bedraggled, exhausted, watching these 2 barely adult women shrink against the watery horizon. We were on our own now. Close to 100 miles of lakes and trails to push ourselves through, equipped with a waterlogged map, a pack of food, and several canoes. We set out the next morning. Starving and sleep-deprived, we dipped our paddles into the water, hoping we were reading the map correctly. I knew I looked as bad as the others. My shorts were already falling off me. My long, unwashed hair tore jaggedly when it caught in my sleeping bag zipper. My shoulders had been rubbed raw from portaging canoes and kayaks and now were oozing. Bloody, scabbed-over mosquito bites covered my sunburned arms and legs. But here whining did no good. When I dropped a canoe in portage, no one stopped to help or even commiserate. Each of us struggled under a big load. Each of us seemed as hungry and exhausted and miserable as the other. Even the athletic girls were dripping in sweat and had lost their early swagger. In our feeding frenzy after solo, key provisions started to rot because we ate our favorite foods first. No one thought about hamburger meat and chicken going bad faster than processed meat. Tensions flared. No real leader emerged among us. At every trail, we argued over which way the map was pointing. We pushed on in glum silence. Hey, look at that! One of the East Coast girls had spotted an oasis on a tiny island, a log cabin store selling groceries to boaters. We had likely veered far off course to come across such a civilized venture. We went inside and drooled. Everything missing in our world lay before us. Peanut butter, Snickers bars, root beer, chips, bread, salami, cheese. We instantly unified as a group. We pled poverty, starvation, but the middle-aged woman behind the counter only scowled at us. We promised her to pay later, double, no triple the cost. Within an hour, she caved. We feasted, celebrated, laughed. We had conspired and beat Outward Bound. We had won. We later made good and sent far more than we owed her, but she'd actually given us much more, a newfound camaraderie and good spirits for the rest of the trip back. Still, it seemed no minor miracle when base camp materialized where the map indicated it would. We had made it. We had come through, scathed, which should still be a word, but alive. Whatever filled the last days of camp, I can't recall, just a lightness, a relief as we neared the end. The last day at camp, leaders pushed us out for a final run. This time they told us how far. 8 miles. I'd never run that far, but we all made it that day, me floating into camp on a runner's high, not far behind the rest of the group. We hugged each other and cried as we parted. The bus carried me and my broken suitcase and unused guitar back to the airport. 2 flights delivered me home to my parents, who didn't recognize me when I walked off the jetway. I hadn't come home the same. Turns out I was one of the lucky ones. Some campers that summer didn't make it home at all. At an Outward Bound camp further out west, 2 teenage girls died in a sudden snowstorm. It wasn't hard to imagine that happening. Maybe the girls died in a truly random freak summer snowstorm that no one could have foreseen, or maybe the organization could have kept them closer to base camp with thermal blankets on the odd chance they'd need them. I wondered since then, though, what editor thought writing an essay would qualify an out-of-shape teenage girl for survival camp? And what really went through my parents' minds when I told them what Outward Bound put me through? If they were appalled, they didn't show it. Of course, these were the same parents who had never questioned my parochial school's peculiar teaching styles and punishments, not in my hearing at least. Their generation held authorities and experts in high esteem. What qualified mere parents to question school personnel or camp leaders about their choices? But others died too. In 2006, a non-athletic Massachusetts girl won a different essay contest and went on to attend a camp in Utah. Weeks later, she died of heat stroke, hiking in 110-degree heat, with no leader or other campers within miles of her. Off the California coast, 2 campers drowned when their canoes tipped in stormy Pacific waters. More deaths and injuries occurred that I won't list here. It was a dangerous edge they pushed us all toward. Still, surviving camp left its mark on me. It forged a grit in me I hadn't possessed before. I could do hard things. My winning brought about character shifts in me, life lessons. Watch for submerged rocks, hold your paddle ready, take the next step, trust the person holding your rope, balance before moving ahead. Whining wins nothing. Okay, well, maybe that last lesson didn't stick as well. Thankfully, I arrived home, more tested than traumatized, with a liberated sense of what being a girl can mean. Decades later, I'm still a survivor.
Jan Cooper, I enjoyed your story so much. It was so unexpected. Especially when I saw the title was Winning.
It didn't feel like winning, did it?
I love the question. You asked, what editor thought writing an essay would qualify an out-of-shape teenage girl for survival camp?
Right.
Really great question.
That was the question, right? Is like, how did they think this was a good idea? That if somebody could write, they could actually have anything to do with the camp like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you actually are hitting on one reality of the writing life is you're always, when you write, you're always a little smarter, a little wiser, a little kinder, it's a little better version of yourself that ends up on the page that can possibly give the wrong impression of who you are. Like maybe you can come across as a person who could survive a survival camp.
Right. Yeah. And maybe they didn't even know it was a survival camp. Who knows?
Yeah, right.
Or a paper products, it was all in the paper product industry up in the northern woods. And very likely they had no clue either what they were getting me into. So
the questions you asked toward the end, and reflections that end up, in some ways, this is a sad story told for laughs, right? I mean, this could have been a bad thing. Yeah. And as you observe it, these kind of things do end badly for some people. But at what point did you? I'd just love to hear you talk about how you process this. How did this go from? At some point, you could see the humor in it. At some point, you saw the danger in it. Was this all happening real time, or is this on reflection later?
Well, a lot of it came with reflection later. I was just trying to survive when I was there. Yeah. And I never questioned the adults who allowed me to do this.
Yeah.
From one, I'm sure my parents had no idea. You couldn't Google the camp and the reviews and all that back then. And, that we all, I'd been camping, like I said, I knew how to be in the outdoors. It wasn't strange to me, I thought, until I was out there without even a sleeping bag or a tent or food, for starters. Yeah. So, I think the humor of it struck me later, and also the danger, reading later, realized, if something had happened to me while I was alone on that island, who would have known? I had no way of contacting anyone.
Well, hearing your story, reading your story made me think about something we talk about a lot in habit world. And that is, we all have heard, write what you know. Yeah. But sometimes the real action is what you don't know about what you do know.
Right.
So we always ask, what is it that you don't know about what you do know? And that feels like a big part of what, especially toward the end of this piece, that feels like what you're doing. You're saying, here's what I knew, and now here are all these things we didn't know.
Right. That's exactly right. Just finding out more about the camp in general and where it came from, and just being thrust in there with no earthly idea of what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I love this illustration of that principle, that the real action when you're writing is often, the questions you still have, not the authority, the things that you know.
Yeah. I was surprised to hear how much the camp is probably unchanged.
Really?
Well, I mean, it's not that long ago, but they probably have more safeguards in place than they did back then. Let's hope.
Let's hope.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Jan Cooper, thanks so much for being here and for sharing this story with us. And I'm really glad you survived.
You too. And thanks for sharing my story.
The Habit Podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. You can support their work, including this podcast, by becoming a member. Visit rabbitroom.com/membership. Special thanks as well to Taylor Leonard for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for the Habit Podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorleonard.com. The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.